I've always been a light sleeper, but the night my new neighbor moved in, I barely slept at all. It started with the sound of heavy furniture being dragged across the floor at 3 a.m. That was just the beginning of a nightmare I never saw coming. A few weeks ago, the house next door, which had been abandoned for months, finally got a new occupant. It was a man in his late 40s, tall and gaunt, with sunken eyes and an unsettling smile. When I went over to introduce myself, his handshake was cold and clammy. He said his name was Mr. Dwyer, and he had just moved into town for a fresh start. Strange things began happening almost immediately. Every night, without fail, I'd hear scraping noises, like something heavy being pushed around. Sometimes it was a low, rhythmic tapping on the shared fence. But the worst was the whispering, faint, but definitely there. It wasn't the sound of a TV or radio, but more like someone talking to themselves, or to something else. One night, curiosity got the best of me. I looked through my blinds toward his house, only to see him standing in his backyard, completely still, staring directly at my window. My stomach dropped. He had no reason to know I was watching, yet his gaze never wavered. The next morning, I found deep scratch marks on my side of the fence. They weren't from an animal. They were long, jagged, and looked deliberate. I asked another neighbor if they had noticed anything strange, but they just shook their head and muttered, "Don't get involved." One night, as I was about to fall asleep, I heard footsteps on my porch. My blood ran cold as I realized they weren't going away. Peeking through the peephole, I saw Mr. Dwyer standing there, motionless. He wasn't knocking or ringing the bell, just standing, staring at my door. I called the police, but by the time they arrived, he was gone. They checked his house, but when they came back, they looked pale. "That house is empty," one officer muttered. "No furniture. No sign of anyone living there." I didn't sleep that night. I kept all the lights on, expecting something to happen. At 3 a.m., I heard my doorknob jiggle. I held my breath. Then a whisper, "Let me in." I called 911 again, but when they arrived, there was no one there. The scratches on my door were fresh, though. The next morning, I watched from my window as a moving truck pulled up. A young couple stepped out, smiling. "Finally," the woman said. "No more empty house next door." I asked them about Mr. Dwyer, but they looked confused. "No one lived here before us," the man said. "It's been abandoned for years." I packed my bags that night and left. Whatever lived in that house had taken an interest in me, and I wasn't going to wait around to find out why. I still wonder about that house and the thing that called itself Mr. Dwyer. If you ever move into a neighborhood and something feels off about your new neighbor, trust your instincts. And whatever you do, don't open the door at 3 a.m.